Welcome to an Ultra edition of the Stories Told podcast. Today we're revisiting our full discussion of the television series Loki, both seasons 1 and seasons 2. Whether you're catching up or jumping back in, this is your all-in-one deep dive for Loki. Today we're talking about the story told in season 1 of the television series Loki. And I'm going to read the synopsis, which is available on the Google Knowledge panel when you type Loki in on Google. Loki, the god of mischief, steps out of his brother's shadow to embark on an adventure that takes place after the events of Avengers Endgame. So did you like this series, Mike?
I did. I thought it had a lot of fun things in it. It was very different than kind of maybe what one would expect coming off of Avengers, Infinity War, and Endgame. But I think that helped, right? We don't need to see more of the movie. I want to see a different aspect of the world that the MCU had created for the MCU. So I thought there was a lot of interesting things that were going on in here. I liked kind of the setup that they had for it. They pulled us out from the movie. They gave us that opening scene. And then boom, we're into the world of the Loki TV show. I love how the TVA, the Time Variance Authority, I think is what it was sort of this old-timey bureaucracy. It's like they had all this high-tech stuff, but like the face of everything kind of felt like from, decades ago. I thought that was kind of cool. Yeah, and there's a lot of interesting things that they did with the plot, right? I like a lot of the twists that they came up with. The idea of hiding out, camping, living at the end of the world in moments in different places. I thought that was very clever, how you could be there and it didn't affect anything, really, because everything was going to get wiped out there anyway. I thought that was a very clever idea. The Mobius character, I like the way he's set up. I like the way Owen Wilson plays him and how he relates to Loki, how he sort of gives him a chance. He's willing to let him run a little bit, but at the same time, keep an eye on him. He's not getting the wool pulled over his eyes. He knows what's going on. I like that. Yeah, all the twists were cool, right? The other Loki is a woman. They find out that the TVA employees are being lied to about being created, then that they're all variants. We find out that the timekeepers are actually just props and puppets, essentially, these androids that are just there with someone else behind the scenes. Very sort of Wizard of Oz type thing. We find out that the pruning doesn't immediately kill someone. And then at the very end, Mobius doesn't know who Loki is. So they do a lot of twists in the story, which you're not really expecting because they're going along pretty quick from one thing to the next, and it keeps it interesting. And I think that was the main thing in the show, is they kept it interesting throughout. It's different. It's kind of weird. It's not like the Thor movies or the Avengers, so they're taking a risk with this show, much like they did with WandaVision. So I like that, and I like that we get to see a little bit more into what makes Loki tick, a little bit into his psyche and his background and, what he feels about the people around him. And we get to see him, theoretically at least, change over the course of the show, which was interesting. I thought it was funny that the only other person who Loki can love, being a narcissist, is himself, essentially. Thought that was funny. And I like that Loki and Mobius became friends by the end of it. I like that Loki got to help enchant the storm monster. We see him sort of grow his abilities over the course of the story, which was interesting. I wasn't expecting that. You kind of figure he's a god, he has these powers, and that's it. But then he finds out, wait, there's these other versions of me who are more powerful or who can do different things, and it helps him grow in a sort of a physically manifest way. So I thought that was interesting too. And then I like at the end how it's left open and foreboding. We kind of talked about that with Strange New Worlds a minute ago. The same thing at the end of this episode. You're like, things are not good. So I'm curious to see where this next season will go that's coming up. The MCU kind of touched upon the same character in, what was it, the Ant-Man Quantumania, I think. But it seemed a little bit disconnected from the person we see here, who remains. So yeah, I'm interested to see where this goes. I would say generally overall, I liked it. I was positive on it. And I'm interested to see where we head next time. How about you? Did you like it overall? What did you like if you did?
Liked it. Actually, watching it the second time, better. I liked it the first time, watching it the first time, very much. I liked how they were, like you just said, being very kind of experimental with the television series, kind of going off in different directions with different storytelling. I mean, our Marvel movies are pretty straightforward plots. Good, and sometimes incredibly complex, but still pretty straightforward plots. This one, I was never sure where it was going because of the twists and turns that you mentioned. And I enjoyed that. But I also sometimes felt a little overwhelmed because I enjoy trying to figure out what's going to happen next, and I could not figure out what was going to happen next in this series. Every time I think I had it, something happened, and I was like, whoop, off in the direction. Wow, I have no clue what's going on here. There was so much character development, so much world building that was in place. It was sometimes felt a little overwhelming. And I didn't have that problem watching it the second time. The second time I was actually able to sit back and really enjoy it and realize this is a brilliant series. I like the mystery at it, and there's a lot of mystery. There are layers of mystery here, and you're constantly peeling back the layers to discover another mystery, and I really like that. The writing is tight, the action is tight, it moves along really well. Very little not to like here. The other thing I think that helped me appreciate this second viewing was that some of the series that came after this in the Marvel Universe were not so well developed. They did not have the same kind of, it didn't appear to have the same kind of character development and the same kind of world building that this and WandaVision had. And so then to come back to this series and be able to sink my teeth into it after not being able to do that in other following series was also really good. It made me really appreciate all the work that went into this one.
Yeah, I agree. I think the other thing for me, I think their post-Endgame TV shows, well, I guess they started the TV shows after that, for me have been better than the movies. I think a lot of the movies have failed in some pretty spectacular ways, unfortunately, mostly resulting from just poor writing. It's like someone did a first draft and they just made a movie off of it without seeing all the inconsistencies and things like that. And while I think there's some of that here as well, I think it holds together a little better. And like you said, there's a lot of mystery. And a lot of world building things that are there, and it's really hard to predict where this story is going to go because it kind of throws you off balance right from the beginning. Where is he? What's happening? And it kind of maintains that throughout, which I think is enjoyable and consistent for the show.
Yeah. So, is there anything that you might have done differently as a writer with this show?
A number of little things that I noticed watching it through again, some little inconsistencies that they had, so maybe some world building things that didn't quite connect. The first thing I noticed, again, because I'm watching it the second time, it's not something I caught first time through. If the TVA is hunting this Loki variant, right? Thinking, wouldn't they already know who this character is? Wouldn't they know that it's a woman? And yeah, and we find out later, in fact, they do. they caught her as a girl, and they should know that this is a female that they're hunting, right? Or if, there's multiple of them out there loose, and they don't know which one is this one, they should have mentioned that. I think just saying that, oh, there's a few of them loose, and one of them is doing this, right? Or multiple or something, I don't know, but that seemed like a bug in the script. Like, oh, we don't know if this is a male or female, because they keep referring to the Loki as a he and a him, but they should know that it's a she, because she was caught by them before and got loose. So I thought that was like they were trying to make a cool reveal with their reveal, leading us to believe, oh, it's another, male Loki, and then it's not, it's a woman. It's like, which that's fine, but then don't show that you already caught this person before and knew that it wasn't a woman, or knew that it was a woman. So that was one thing. And then one thing I wasn't sure, I have to think about this maybe some more, because as I was watching it, I was like, so just existing causes a branch in the timeline? That doesn't seem to make sense. Like, she was just born basically and was a child, and they caught her playing with a toy, not doing anything. That seemed weird. I don't know. The He Who Remains character, what was his name? Kang, I think. Is that what he was?
Yeah, I think that he is to be Kang the Conqueror.
Kang the Conqueror, right? Yeah. So it's like he just thought at one point, like, oh wait, we should capture that girl because it leads to this other thing. But like, wouldn't they have already known that earlier? And like some of that grabbing of people out of their timelines seems like the explanation didn't make sense to me. This Loki I get, because he's, he gets the Tesseract and he's zipping through time and space, and he's supposed to go in this other path. He did something that I could see, okay, that could cause a problem with the timeline. But the other people, including like everyone living their lives at the TVA apparently, just seem to be existing, doing their thing, and they're pulled out of their timeline for not a particular reason. So like that never really got explained at the end, other than I guess he just sees where they're all going to go. It's not necessarily that they do something and they deserve punishment for that or whatever. It's just, them being here causes a problem. So I would have liked them to have explained that a little bit at the end, at least just touched upon it.
And maybe season 2.
Yeah, could be. Yeah, maybe in season 2.
I think that he's pulling all the Lokis out because he's seen that the Lokis can cause his downfall.
Yeah, the Lokis seem to be particular, right? Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of Lokis. And I think it's anyone that he sees who could it's almost like an echo of, remember the plot in Winter Soldier, Captain America Winter Soldier, where they had the algorithm that picked out anyone who could be a threat to Hydra. I'm kind of thinking, that's my theory. It's kind of like that. Anyone who could be a threat to Kang in the future, he has the TVA pull. And that's why he created the TVA. That's why they exist. That's my theory. Anyway.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, you've got these lords of mischief and chaos out there. They can definitely cause trouble with your plan. Yeah, I mean, anytime you're talking multiversal things like that, interdimensional stuff, it can get so complicated to keep track of that. And maybe you're right. Maybe it's just like, well, the simplest way to deal with this, just at any hint of trouble with these Lokis in particular, we get them out of there. Could be. The Lokis on Lamentis, right? The male and female Loki, the main characters. They supposedly created this significant branch when they were looking at each other, sort of longingly. To me, that didn't make sense, because had the TVA not come in, they both would have died anyway, which according to the rules they set up, it shouldn't have caused a branch or any kind of notice, because they were there at one of these end of time moments for that world. So I didn't quite get that. Like, that wouldn't have been an issue had they just not shown up. I'm not sure how they could have handled that differently, but it was something that I noticed. I get that they wanted to end that episode on like a dark cliffhanger where it's like, oh, it looks like they're doomed, right? And then the next episode, they kind of get saved by the TVA. But maybe they could have made it so they were about to get away in the Ark or something and screw up the timeline, and then the TVA comes in. I don't know, something. it just seemed like it broke their own rule that they made up. And then I guess overall, I think. Well, let me skip to this other specific point first. I wish at the end, kind of one of the climactic moments where they're trying to enchant the big dark storm cloud beast, whose name I forget. I wish Loki's learning of that enchantment was tied to some personal growth or learning some specific thing, rather than just him being able to do it all of a sudden. It's like, okay, it's time for him to do it now, and he has the ability. I never really liked that, especially, in climactic moments. It's like, those are good opportunities to show that the character has learned something or grown. And in this case, it was just, they did it for 5 seconds, and that was enough. Like, why did he learn it at that moment? Why did it suddenly kick in? There didn't seem to be any reason other than enough time had elapsed. So I didn't like that. I think that could have been connected to something else, or if they wanted it to be time-based, like, we need to do this for a minute, they could have used it as a ticking clock or something. I think there was a missed opportunity there. And then overall, I didn't understand the power level of the different characters, of the different Lokis. In particular, the Loki we're familiar with from the movies. We see him stop a building falling on him and throwing it back up into the air. So it's like he has this huge power, apparently. Why can't he just use that power to knock people away from him or trying to catch him or kill him? It's like, no, he's doing like hand-to-hand combat with people. It's one of the problems they have with like a lot of the later Star Wars stuff. The more power you give the Jedi, the more you're wondering why they're ever, engaged in any kind of close combat when they could just lift someone off the ground. It kind of felt like the same thing here. What power does he have? Before it was kind of enchantment and illusion, it seemed, and now it's like he can throw a building off of him. So that seemed to kind of come out of nowhere and, again, break some of the rules they had set up, or at least make it not understandable why he had any kind of challenge fighting any of these other normal people. And then overall, I think I was a little disappointed in the main Loki character, and just, we didn't seem to get much of a plan from him. It seemed to be more about, what's her name? Sylvie? Was that her name?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So it seemed like she was the one driving it more, and it's like, he was kind of saying he had a plan, but he didn't really have a plan most of the time. And most of his plans were kind of half-baked, which undermined his character a little bit from the movies. I guess it didn't bother me too much because the show was cleverly called Loki, and the opening title sequence has Loki spelled out in all these different symbols and letter types and things like that, because it's not just about this Loki, it's about Loki as more of like a concept and a character across dimensions. So it didn't bother me too much, but I did notice that it's like, it seemed like they tweaked his character a little bit. Before, he was so driven and he never give up, and he was always scheming and hatching and one step ahead of people. And it seems like here he was constantly one-upped by some of the other characters. But overall, I liked it, and I'm not sure how you would adjust that. I guess you could have more specific plans and just have them fail. There's a lot going on. There's plenty of reasons it could fail. That was just something I noticed. Anyway, of me yakking. Is there anything that you saw that you would improve, or some other way that you would have handled something?
All your observations are fantastic. A lot of them, it's funny because I made similar observations, but I would then just sort of like, well, we have a season 2 coming, so maybe they'll fix it there. So I'm like willing to kind of put it off for maybe that this is a clever, undone thread that they're going to do up really neatly in season 2 or beyond. Who knows? Anyway, so I think all of your comments are really well taken, especially the one about Loki and his plans. The sense I got from that was, when you look at Loki, yeah, he's got a lot of plans, but they all seem to fail. Sooner or later, Loki's plans all fail.
Right. They specifically mention that in the show, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so we get to see that with the TVA about how, when he's taken to the TVA, he is so horribly outmatched by this bureaucracy that he keeps trying his usual plans and they're failing spectacularly, or even not spectacularly, just consistently. And they fail until he realizes that the timekeepers, which is what his goal was to get to the timekeepers and somehow take over the TVA and get into a position of power, which is always his goal. That's when he kind of started following Sylvie, I think. I don't know. What do you think?
I think that's true. It seems like from the writing perspective, that's what they were setting up, right? It was self-aware. He's a schemer, he's a plotter, but he does fail, right? Even the other ones were saying that. It's like that's what we do. We fail, apparently. And maybe it's a matter of him thinking he's more clever than he is because he has these abilities that other people don't have, right? He's overestimating himself. That could very well be the case. But and also it's like I wanted him to be more proactive and the driver of the story, whereas it was another Loki who was more driving the story, right? Again, that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's Loki as a concept than necessarily this Loki, even though this is the Loki we've latched onto the movies.
Yeah.
So it was a risky decision. I thought it worked. I still enjoyed the show throughout.
Yes. Well, the only thing that I actually made note of for this was the very last episode. We have so much action, so many twists and turns, so much wonderful peeling back of layers. And then the last episode, we have a whole lot of exposition by Kang. We're just sitting in office chairs, listening to him. And it was surprising me that just the change of the pace. The rest of the series, the pace was so good and so consistent. And then all of a sudden, we just stop and listen to this guy talk. It didn't keep the great pace that the rest of the series had enjoyed, and it seemed unnecessary. There must have been a different way of doing that.
Yeah,
I would
that
think.
is a good note. Again, that sort of that whole episode is kind of a twist, right? It's like, oh, here. Who's behind this, or what is behind this, and then find out, oh, it's this character who has, at least according to him, and protecting the timeline from all the other versions of him who are much worse. That's a great concept, and kind of see that. Did you see the Marvel What If show?
Yes.
And we kind of see that there, right? He's in that as well.
Yes.
I remember right. It's interesting, but yeah, you're right. It's just, him telling his plan that helped for most of that episode. And then it's interesting. And he's a great actor. He pulls it off really well and makes it fun to watch.
I think I would have liked for them to have used his acting skills a little bit more effectively to do something a little bit more action oriented.
Yeah, a little more dynamic.
Yeah, dynamic. That's a good.
Yeah, I agree with that. Because they're just the two Lokis standing there. Almost felt, from an acting perspective, awkward. Like, okay, we're just standing here. What do we do?
Yeah.
I didn't really think about that until you brought it up.
And that was a scene that did not feel consistent to their characters. Standing around and sitting around is not what Lokis do.
Right.
And the rest of it I thought was really interesting. What was going on with Judge Renslayer was really interesting. What was going on with Mobius was really interesting. That was... I thought those, interspersing all of that was really fascinating. But then just sitting in the office chairs across a desk, it didn't work, which was a shame because the rest of the series did so good. And and I'm not entirely sure. I did not sit down and kind of think out about how I would have built in this exposition scene because it was necessary, obviously, so that they understood what the stakes were. And I'm not entirely sure how that might have been different. But I would have liked it to have been different.
Yeah, because you're right. You need to get the information across, obviously. I think they kind of tried with like the little gizmo that he had that was showing the various versions of him. It felt kind of like the same thing in Guardians of the Galaxy 2 when Ego was explaining what happened in the past. Sort of the same scene, right? It's like, tell you about what's going on, and then I have these little, mannequin representations of what was happening. It's like the same thing, but at least in Guardians of the Galaxy 2, that wasn't the end of the movie, the climactic scene. It was just sort of information along the way. So yeah, you're right. That is interesting. I don't know how else you would do that. You'd have to rethink that scene a bit, I think.
Yeah. I mean, so both the Lokis would be trying to get a position of power in that scene. The guy behind the desk, by definition, is in the position of power. And both of them would be trying to see how they could maneuver or manipulate to get the power switched. Now, they had just come together as partners, but their partnership is fragile. And that was one of the things that was really good in that scene, is that Kang recognized the fragility of that partnership, and he went right for it and to try to split them apart. I think maybe more of that. It would have been really cool if he had done his exposition while they were fighting. Today we're talking about the story told in Episode 1, Season 2 of Loki. And I am going to read the synopsis that comes up on Google when you type in Loki, Season 2, Episode 1. Loki finds himself lost to time and torn, quite literally, between past, present, and future. So what'd you think about this episode, Mike?
I liked the episode. It felt fun. I was engaged. I liked that they picked up right from where they left off at the end of season 1.
Yeah.
Which is good, because they kind of left us hanging there. But I think they did a good transition. Like, okay, here's where we were. Here's where we're going now. It felt a little different, maybe, because there's a lot going on, with him jumping back and forth in time. I loved how they joked about what he looks like when he gets pulled through time, because it was just like this really awful visual, like this horrible thing, and then they actually made fun of that. I thought that was pretty good. There's a lot of good humor throughout. I would say I think they did pretty well. Like Mobius losing all of his skin, funny stuff. And I loved Ouroboros, Obi, with Ke Huy Quan. He reminded me of his kid characters, like from the Goonies and Indiana Jones back in the day. So he had that same vibrancy to his characters. I thought he was played well. And I like how they set up the challenge that Loki faced with, because when he came back at the end of last season, he's just there and he's in the TVA, and we didn't know anything about him being, coming unstuck in time, right, where he's bouncing around. So this is a new thing they introduced, and they get us into that pretty quick. So as a viewer, again, like with the first season, it starts off, there's a lot going on, and you're kind of always, sort of off balance, not sure what's coming next. So this episode definitely continues that, where you're like, I don't know where this is going. I'm not sure where we're headed, which could be bad if they don't have a good setup for it. But I think they probably have a plan. Obviously, the episodes are already out, are already written. So we'll see where it goes. But yeah, I was definitely caught a little off guard. It's a bit chaotic as to what's happening, but it's fun. I'm interested, and I'm looking forward to see where this goes. What about you?
Chaotic is a word I wrote in my notes too. I loved the pace. I loved how it, like you said, we just jumped right in almost exactly at the same moment we left at the end of season 1. And I really like that. Now, I don't know if they filmed it right away or they waited, but I think sometimes when there's a delay between episodes, sometimes they kind of forget either exactly where they were or what they were doing or the intensity of what they were doing. And they didn't do that here. It was boom, right, moving right along. And I really liked that. And there was no downtime in this episode at all. You also were going along with this mystery of what was going on. What's happening to Loki? Why is it happening? Where is he going? What is he seeing? And we eventually figure out that he is traveling back and forth through the past, present, and future, as the synopsis said, at different times in the TVA, which is fascinating because it's all the same people.
Right.
It's just the sort of circumstances that have changed. And what's really fascinating is the implication that in the past, Kang was the face that was hanging over the TVA instead of the timekeepers. But our people don't remember that. There is a lot of layers here that still need to be unpacked. And I love that. It's like sitting down in front of a 5-course meal and you just know every step is going to be really good. I'm really looking forward to learning more about what's going on here.
Yeah, I agree.
I agree with you. The banter, we got right back to the great relationship between Mobius and Loki. That is a foundational element to this story. I think the relationship between Loki and Sylvie is really foundational and very compelling. But the relationship between Mobius and Loki is much more like bedrock to this story.
Ooh, that's a good point. Yeah.
I really like that they got back into that relationship right away. They trying to figure out what's going on. They're more trusting of each other than ever before. Because Mobius now trusts Loki. Whereas from season 1, Mobius was always one step ahead of Loki's machinations. Now they're both just sitting there going, I have no idea what's going on, but we're going to figure it out together. And you just know that eventually down the road here, this friendship's going to be tested. And tested hard. And I'm looking forward to seeing how they do it. I think the writing is setting this up really beautifully.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah, I love Ouroboros. I think this is a great character. And one of the things that I made a note of here is how all the characters that we're seeing here, and it was last season, we got to spend more time with a lot of the characters last season. We got to spend more time with Mobius and Renslayer. And this episode, we got to see a whole bunch of characters all at once. And they were still given layers and three-dimensionality. And that's such great writing. I mean, we had the little meeting of the administrative heads of the TVA, and each one of them has a perspective, and you can see how different they are. You can see how unique they are. And I'm not talking visually. I mean, personality-wise, they're unique. And I don't remember the names of the characters, but we've got the one character who is out to get Sylvie with one of the hunters, and there's some kind of intimacy between them. I thought that was fascinating. It took 2 seconds to show this relationship between the two of them, but it adds another layer to the mystery. It was brilliant. That's the same thing we got to see with Ouroboros. This is a Mr. Fix-It at the TVA, and yet within moments, we had so much layers of character. He remembers things, and that's really fascinating. He remembers things that Mobius doesn't. Why? I love the character. I hope we see him again. I hope he isn't just a one-off, episode kind of character who was there to provide exposition, which, by the way, I made note of how great that exposition was. It was so natural. He was there to explain some things, but it didn't sound like he was explaining things. And it was really organic and natural, and a part of his character, his sort of providing us information, was part and parcel of the kind of character he was. I'm just thinking, this is great, brilliant writing.
Yeah, those are great notes. Yeah, the Ouroboros character is very interesting. It's he knows all this stuff, but he seems almost outside of the rest of the TVA.
Yeah.
Because the other people seem sort of clueless as to what's going on, right? And like you said, sometimes they don't remember things, and he remembers all of this, and he's read all the rules because he wrote them, or he wrote the manual or something like that. So, yeah, I as well. I hope they don't. I hope this isn't just a one-off character. I hope they use him, if not throughout the season, at least he pops up again. Yeah, I think he has the opportunity to continue to provide humor, because there's a lot of humor with how his interactions go, and also a good way of giving us exposition and kind of smoothing out some of the rough spots maybe in how the system of the TVA works.
What I'm wondering, based on what you just said, as I was listening, I was thinking, in the first season we had Miss Minutes, who kind of provided some exposition for us. And then we learned at the end of the first season that she was... The relationship is unclear, but appears to be a tool of Kang the Conqueror, or He Who Remains, or whatever he calls himself. And in the same way, I'm kind of wondering now if Ouroboros, being so knowledgeable about the TVA the way Miss Minutes was, if he is not also some kind of tool of He Who Remains or Kang or whatever.
Yeah, that's it. I didn't even think about that, but that could be. I do wonder how his character works because he knows all this stuff, and he's like, "Oh, this thing's over here, and that's over there. I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna do that." And at the same time, he said he's kept constantly busy by the pneumatic tubes that keep coming down. So, like, how is he managing all of these things? And it raises questions of how does the time work?
Yeah.
In the TVA, right? That's one of the questions that I was wondering from the beginning with Loki's getting pulled back and forth. And they said like time works differently there. It's like, how does it work? Because there's obviously a past, present, and future in the TVA, but also everything's changed in the TVA now. So that adds another dimension to it. I like how, like at the end of the previous episode or previous season, right? When Loki comes back, he gets pushed through the door and he shows up and everything's different. So okay, the world has kind of changed, and Mobius doesn't recognize him anymore. So like, oh, everything changed from out. Now he's in like a different version of the TVA, which is true. But in this episode, we also learn that the reason that Mobius doesn't remember him is because he's in the past. Like that wasn't even hinted at in last season. So that was a cool new wrinkle that they added. Yeah, it's a lot of playing with time, which is a risky business, as you know. It's like time travel has all kinds of potential problems and pitfalls with trying to explain things. So the more you play with it, the more potential holes you open up in your plot. So it's going to be interesting to see how they play this out.
It's funny that you should mention that because as we talked earlier about world Bibles, when I wrote my time travel series, I did have a visual timeline with sub-timelines related so that I could keep track of it all, because you had to.
Yeah, you have to. And in this one, they do the thing where you sort of like the character's timeline progresses in real time, even if they go in the past. So when Loki goes in the past and he's talking to Ouroboros memories in the future are being updated as Loki's experiencing them as if he were in the present still. It's
I loved that. I absolutely loved that. So is there anything that you might have done differently?
It's hard to say because not knowing where they're going, it's hard to think, oh, they should have done this and should have done that, because there's a lot of weird stuff going on, right? And it's a lot of chaos. So right now, there's a bit of confusion, but also it's kind of mystery. I'm like, okay, how are they going to handle this? How is this going to work out? When Loki gets pruned, apparently, toward the end of the episode, but then he's back. Like, what happened there? We don't really know about. But I mean, those were intentional decisions, right? It's not like, oh, they just accidentally did this. Right? There's a reason the writers wrote that in there. I guess the one thing I'm left wanting is just more explanations for like how stuff works. How does the time work there? How does are they outside of these other timelines? Are they themselves at the end of time? What is the dimension that they're in? There's like a lot of weird sort of technical questions of how things work, which ordinarily wouldn't necessarily be significant or relevant to the story. But in this case, I almost feel like they are because it's so intertwined. So I'm hoping that they explain some of that as we go forward. And then also with Ouroboros, this is such a knowledgeable person about what's going on, who's been apparently locked away down there and only comes out every couple hundred years or whatever it is to fix something. How does he know so much? That's sort of an unknown thing. That's another reason I want this character to come back, so we get more about him and his background. And so it doesn't feel like, oh, he was just a tool needed for the plot. I really hope that isn't the case, but we'll see. As far as what I would improve, I like I said, I'm not sure. We'll see if these questions get answered as we go on. What about you? Were the things that stood out like, oh, they should have done this, or I would have done that?
Very little, like you said, because this is a story that is unfolding one episode at a time. So I agree with you 100%. A lot of the questions may be answered. From a writing standpoint, what I made note of was a couple of things. One, and maybe it isn't a writing thing, maybe it's just a watching thing, but we used the word chaotic several times talking about this episode. It was almost hard to follow because there was so much going on so quickly. I was actually grateful for when Ouroboros showed up because things slowed down then. And then I could catch up and kind of figure out what was going on.
Yes.
I liked the pace of how fast it was going, but sometimes it almost went too fast for me. That may just be a me thing.
I think I felt that too, which I generally like. I like when shows don't linger. They kind of sort of get to the point and move along. I mean, if I would contrast this with Ahsoka, which I just watched and you just watched, which is very much not that way. There's a lot of overdramatic pauses in that show.
I think the other thing I would have changed from a writing standpoint is that when we are in the quote-unquote present with the Mobius that knows Loki, we also interact to some degree with other members of the TVA. And we're not seeing the panic that I would expect to see with all of the timelines branching, because their job is to keep this sacred timeline going, right? And even though the rest of the staff don't know what's going on, they do see, because they've got all these monitors everywhere, that the sacred timeline has gone bonkers. And yet they're all so calm. I would have liked to have seen some freaking out from the staff to kind of add to that sense of everything is falling apart. We see it with the admin. The admin's all meeting and they're stressed and they got to try to figure out what to do about the sacred timeline. And Hunter 15, is that what Hunter 15? Is that her name? Anyway, she's saying, we're all variants and this isn't true and the timekeepers aren't real. And she's got her own perspective of what's there to panic about. But the staff should be panicking about the sacred timeline going bonkers.
Right. That's a good point. And when they were in this sort of council meeting, the thing I was thinking about in there, they're deliberating about what to do, and we need to keep going with this, or we need to change that, or whatever. I'm thinking from my perspective, right? If I already know about what's going on, if I'm Mobius, if I'm I forget what the other woman's name was, or her designation was, I'm thinking, this whole meeting is pointless. Like, everything's changed. It's just kind of wasting time here.
Yeah.
Like, let's get on with things. It's like, I don't need to be in this meeting. What are you going to do? Right? What authority do you even have at this point?
So have some of the chaos be part of the interactions among all these people. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So as a writer, what's your takeaway from this episode of Loki?
I generally tend to focus more on plot just naturally, as like how my brain works. But since I don't necessarily know what's going on yet, even though I found a lot of the stuff interesting, for me, like you brought up, the more interesting aspect is the characters. I really like the Mobius character and how he's sort of warmed to Loki, and like you said, he trusts him now, and they're going to figure this out together, and how they've kind of bonded. It's like, okay, we've got to make this work. It's like we're both going to risk our lives for each other, essentially. Well, I guess Mobius is just risking his life for Loki, actually. But it's neat to see that change in those characters in particular. I thought the introduction of the Ouroboros character. So for me, I think it's about whatever's happening in the plot, even if you have a chaotic plot, remembering that your character development needs to be continuing. And that's the thing that the viewer or the reader really latches onto more than anything.
Excellent. Yeah. For me, it's keeping an eye on that pacing. There's good, strong pacing that keeps people engaged, but then not pushing it so hard that you lose people because it's too much. And then, like you said, making those characters really pop, and especially those supporting characters who are layered and three-dimensional, even in just a moment.
Yes. Yeah, that's great.
Today we're talking about the story told in episode 2 of season 2 of Loki. And this episode is entitled Breaking Brad. And I will read the short synopsis of the episode available when you type in Loki Breaking Brad on Google. With the TVA on the verge of a temporal meltdown, Loki and Mobius will stop at nothing to find Sylvie. So did you like this episode?
I wasn't hugely positive about this episode. Kind of lost me a bit. There were definitely things about it that I did like. So maybe we'll hit the likes and dislikes in a bit. What was your overall take on it?
I was a little put off on it at first because of the cold open. The cold open was confusing. I didn't know what was going on. It didn't seem to connect to the previous episode or the storyline as I understood it. So it took some time to actually get into the episode until everything sort of resolved into a place where, okay, now this makes sense what's going on. And once we got to the end of it, I enjoyed it.
Okay. Yeah.
Once I sort of understood how this worked into the overall storyline, then yes, I enjoyed it. I probably should watch it again.
Yeah, I feel like I should watch it again probably as well, because like some of my comments are probably, I don't know, they're probably like things that I was uncertain about are probably answered and I just didn't grasp them the first time. I'll start with what I liked about it. I think there's definitely things that I liked. It has a lot of the Loki's style and humor and things like this. Like I like how they need Kang's aura, or he who remains. They need his aura, his temporal aura. Oops, he's dead. He can't get that, at least as far as they know. I thought that was a good setup. It's like it's one of the things the show does well, right? It's like, oh, there's a disaster, or things are worse. Oh, here's another disaster, things are even worse, right? It's like there's this constant sense of here's a new problem, here's a new problem, here's a new problem. So I think they're still doing that well in the show. I like that at the end they came up short and didn't win, right? They didn't win the episode. It's kind of a weird way to say it, but it's like, oh, we were trying to do this thing, didn't succeed. Now what, right? I like that it's not just we wrap things up, in the episode and then we do a new thing next time. No, sometimes it's just you fail at what you're going to do, and then you got to figure it out next time. It leaves it open. They do again. That's something they did in season 1 a lot too. So I like that. This is something we talked about in previous episodes. The idea that Loki is a loser, right? Like they definitely reiterated that here in this episode. The idea that, hey, you can come up with these plans, but what do? Ultimately, you lose. I thought that was funny. And they continue to point that out to show like, hey, this isn't necessarily a hero person or a successful villain person, right? He's going to have challenges and he's not going to succeed, which is kind of cool for a main character. I like that Mobius gave Loki some, room to play with. Like you want to be the villain? Okay, you'll be the villain for this scenario. And it shows he's trusting him more. At this point, it's like they pretty much trust each other, right? Which I think is cool. So we saw the evolution from the first season now to how they work together in this season. I thought Sylvie working at the McDonald's was amusing, though I have a note about that. I think they do setups and goals and failures well. I think they do humor well. So I think a lot of the things that they were doing good at, they still doing good at. We'll get into things I think didn't go as well later, but I want to hear what you liked in this episode.
I have similar likes from this episode. Again, the relationship between Mobius and Loki is amazing. It's awesome. I love watching them work together. And I was kind of thinking that, with Loki's character in the Marvel movie universe, he has an opportunity to come to an understanding and an appreciation of his brother over the course of several movies. We see him in Ragnarok, and I think that was pretty much it, Ragnarok. Ragnarok was kind of the place where Thor said, I've always wanted to be your brother and be your friend, and you have to be who you are, and I accept that, and we're good with that. And then Loki finally feeling accepted, and their connection really developing. And I'm starting to see that Mobius in a way is a surrogate for Thor, because in this television series we get Loki snatched away before he's put into prison, before he loses his mom, before they lose Asgard, all those things that happened in the movies that helped mold his character into a Loki that was actually trusting of Thor and who Thor trusted just before he was killed. So I see Mobius standing in that role while everything goes to pieces around them in the same way that Thor stood in that role, the way as things went to pieces around them in the movies. The parallels are believable and consistent with the character that we've seen from the movies. I love the title, Breaking Brad. Funny.
Yeah, that was great.
Clever. And that's what it was about, in some degree, about this character named Brad, who I guess was B5 previously, and then having to, as you said, find different ways to interrogate him to get him to reveal what he knew in order to find Sylvie, including Loki being a villain. And the other thing I really enjoyed about that is, as you said, we have another iteration of this theme that Loki is a loser. And now I don't know if he's there yet, but it appears from this episode and the things that he was doing as a villain that he's accepting himself as a loser, which is huge, right? He always imagined himself, I am a king. I should be ruling things. And if he accepts himself, hey, I'm a loser. I have ideas. They work. They don't work. How do I make that a strength? I really am enjoying that because that's complex character development. And if that's where they're going, wow. We got to see Ouroboros again. And yes. I love how he bonded with Casey, right? That was a wonderful little tiny scene, but still character developing and moving things forward. I mean, I like the fact that Sylvie settled down in the McDonald's as well. I thought that was charming and interesting. She finished her job. She destroyed the timekeepers who didn't actually exist and destroyed He Who Remains, who created the timekeepers. So as far as she's concerned, her job is done. She did what she set out to do, and she's done, and she's happy at the McDonald's. The other thing I really enjoyed was how they, and like you pointed this out, they raised the stakes again. And this time, I very much appreciated how the stakes were all these branch timelines that were created by the killing of He Who Remains were then pruned. And they reminded us very clearly and very compellingly that these branched timelines are not just lines arcing away from a horizontal line. Their lives, their worlds, their people, and their shock and horror as all of these lives and people were pruned away was really marvelous. Now, my question to you is, are all those people at the end of time now?
Right, yeah. How does that work? I assumed that they were just, I don't know. I don't know how if they pruned individuals, then yeah, they would be. But when they're like putting those bombs down essentially to prune that whole timeline, I don't know what that's doing.
And here I had a theory, and you and I originally talked about, when we talked about the first season of Loki, I forget what we were talking about, I apologize because I don't remember the context, but I had this theory that the reason people who were pruned went to the end of time is because they couldn't actually be killed. Because if they were actually killed, then that would screw up the timeline. So they had to be pruned to the end of time where they ceased to exist because of Eliath, the great big cloud lightning thing. Because they were at the end of time, it didn't matter. But if you prune them out of time otherwise, it would screw things up. So that's why I had this theory that instead of just killing them outright, they were said to be pruned. I'm not sure how that works with my theory, but it was just really interesting, this other layer of temporal complications.
I do wonder how that works. We'll get into that. Yeah, I wonder I wonder where they're going with Loki as a character. Because like you were pointing out, like how his relationship with Mobius and how they're moving forward and working together, and how Loki seems to be becoming more comfortable with himself and accepting his flaws. It doesn't seem like now he's interested in any nefarious, selfish plots. It seems like he's trying to prevent this horrible catastrophe, which is very much not the Loki from the movies. So we're seeing him adapt and evolve. Does that mean, like, they mentioned it, I think it was this episode or the last episode, or both, where it's like, is he becoming a hero now? or is this just a matter of convenience for him to sort of set things back into a stable state so he can go back to who he was? I'm curious to see how they play that out.
Yeah, me too. What would you have done differently for this episode?
Yeah, so there's a few things for me. For me, the episode, I don't know, it felt a little flat. I think they're doing, like, what they're setting up and what the people involved are doing is so big and a bit nebulous that I tend to lose focus on what their goal is. Like, why do they want to find Sylvie? I'm sure that was clear, but even now thinking about it, I don't remember why they wanted to find Sylvie. Like, what is she going to do, or what does she know that's going to help them? I'm not sure. So I think they have so many different things going on that it's hard to maintain focus when you're viewing it. I mean, we mentioned in the previous episode that it was a bit chaotic, and I think that has carried over into this episode. And to be fair, I didn't watch the recap at the beginning of the episode from of the previous episode, so maybe that would have helped, or maybe watching them back to back would have helped. But yeah, I was a little bit lost as to, like, what is the motivation here? What's going on? And I think what also exacerbated that was, like you said, the cold open. We're like, what's going on? Like, this isn't where we ended. What are these people doing now? Why are they here? What is their new goal? And they're finding some random dude, Brad, who it's like, was I supposed to remember that guy? Because I don't. But maybe that's on me. So yeah, I was a little bit lost of what's going on, and I think it didn't compel me as much as it should have, given the scale and the scope of what is happening.
Yeah.
For me, I think focusing on one thread, two threads maybe, would have helped it. Like, okay, here's what the character's doing this episode. Very clear goal. Let's see them go through it. Like, just to ground me a little bit better. It seems like there's this going on. Ouroboros is doing his thing. And, he's trying to build this thing to protect the loom, which, is a little silly, right? Like, the thing is, like, you start getting to this big scale and the stuff starts to feel a little silly. Like, oh, yeah, we just make this machine and it weaves realities together. Like, what? Like, I start the more of this you have, the more it's hard to believe. So I feel like they're starting to open a little bit, like, a lot that is hard to suspend disbelief. I think that's starting to crack through for me.
Okay.
Whereas the first season was more fun and solid and just, it was good writing in the sense of setting up a goal, failing, how we're going to fix that next time. And while they're doing that here, there's just a lot of things that they're opening up, which for me is getting a little bit tough to follow. So I'm hoping they link back together in the next episode and it becomes a little bit more focused. I think so this is something that I've noticed that Marvel movies and shows tend to do especially the movies in the more recent phases, like phase 4 and phase 5, they tend to inject humor sometimes at the expense of character consistency. Yes. And we see that a couple of times in this episode, I feel. Like early on when they meet Brad, right? And then Brad's like, oh, I'm going to go get you some drinks. And then, there's a joke of he's running away, isn't he? It's like, oh, shoot, he is running away. Like, Mobius wouldn't be that stupid. He would know what this guy's going to do. I mean, they just hunted this guy down. He obviously doesn't want to be there. So that felt like...
Yes. Yes, I agree.
A small knock against Mobius's character that wasn't necessary just because they were trying to tell a joke. And I feel like Sylvie working at McDonald's, again, as amusing as I thought that was, I feel kind of the same way. Here's a woman who's been using her wits and grit and determination to survive her entire life. I get that maybe she just wants to relax into a simpler life, but I'm not sure I buy her being satisfied with just doing a mindless job serving burgers at McDonald's. I feel like she would want something more than that. I don't know. What did you think?
Well, let me start with Sylvie, because you ended there and because I have a theory. So, first of all, regarding why they're trying to find her, I think It's a continuation of the original plan from the first season. Find Sylvie. That's why Loki was recruited. And she is still a variant out of time who could theoretically screw up the sacred timeline. So I think the mission is the same, and that's why they're going after. And of course, Mobius is now trying to find her. I'm guessing now. This is just all guesses. Mobius is trying to find her now as sort of damage control, and Loki's trying to find her because he's in love with her. But I think that's why they're still after her, because that's still the mission. It's just a guess, but you're absolutely correct. I think season 2, after all these things that have happened, there needs to be a reiteration of what the goal is. So I think you're absolutely right there, because when you asked that question, I was like, yeah, I wonder why they're doing this. And then I thought, well, she is out of time. She's not where she's supposed to be. So that's probably it. But it really hasn't been set.
I wonder, though. Yeah, but are they worried about that so much, especially if she's just laying low? Because in the first season, it was because she was killing all their agents and coming after the TVA. Now it's like she's not doing anything.
Well, it's
like, just let her be.
Here's the second part of it, right? So this General Dogs went out to find Sylvie. That was her, ostensibly why she went out with her troops of hunters to find Sylvie. Because she destroyed He Who Remains, or because she needs to be brought to justice, or because she represents a huge threat if she decides to, go mischief on them. So I think that piece of it is also part of the underlying reason that they need to find Sylvie, and sort of Mobius and Loki want to find her first before General Dox finds her. But I agree, it's still fuzzy. The other reason is I think she's at the McDonald's to hide, because it is such a low-key place. And you're absolutely correct. I think she would eventually get bored there, but she's there right now to hide from the TVA and just be...
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so...
Yeah, she just wants to, exactly, just be out of the fray. She accomplished her mission. She's like, okay, just leave me alone. I'm going to sit here. But the Docs thing, though, it's like you said, they're going after Sylvie, but it turns out that Docs is just doing her own thing and pruning the timelines and has nothing to do with Sylvie.
And so I, too, was confused by the Brad plot line at the beginning. Who is this guy again? And I think they were really expecting me... a lot out of me to remember that this was the guy that had that emotional headbutt moment with General Dox. I remember thinking at the time when I saw them together, they were mother and son. And so now he essentially disappeared into the past with a device that would stop her from proving his timeline. I think she was saving her son and allowing him to go live a life as a famous person. So that, because he couldn't stand being a variable anymore, and she didn't want him to go through being a variant. She didn't want him to have to live his life knowing he's a variant of the TVA. So they made an arrangement where he would go back, live out his life as a famous person, and she would not prune his timeline. That's my guess, because of that interaction that they had, which did not look like lovers to me. But maybe it was. I don't know. It looked more like parent and child, for whatever that's worth. But it was confusing to me because I didn't remember him. Especially, anyway, so I couldn't figure out who it was for a while. And then finally they said he was Hunter B5, and then I finally connected the dots tenuously. Is that the guy who she bumped her head with? Just... Now, once they got him back to TVA and the interrogation, I thought the interrogation scenes were really good. He knew how to push everybody's buttons. He did it really well. Until we got there, it was hard to follow. And like you said, there was so much crammed into this one episode, it felt a little disjointed. So what's your takeaway as a writer?
My takeaway is clarity. It should always be clear what your characters are trying to do and why. Because if you lose that, I mean, you can lose it for a little bit, for brief moments of time. If you've got an action scene or something like this, you kind of distract for a bit, but very quickly people will lose focus. So yeah, try to make sure, even if you have to have the characters restate their goal, make it clear what's going on and why they're doing it.
My takeaway is almost exactly the same. Take a step back. Make sure the story flows and it is not confusing to your audience. Today we're talking about the story told in Loki, Season 2, Episode 3, 1893. And I will read the very, very short little summary synopsis that you can find when you type in Loki Season 2, Episode 3 into Google. Loki and Mobius go on the hunt to find everyone's favorite cartoon clock as they try to save the TPA. So what did you think of this episode, Mike?
Yeah, last episode we talked about, or I talked about, I was kind of like too much going on. I felt a little unfocused to me. I think for me, this one was a lot better. I was kind of going along with them from the beginning. I like how it played out. I loved the He Who Remains show that he did from 1968. Back then is this weird and sort of wonderful, crazy thing that was going on. I love how he gets the TVA handbook that sort of ends up becoming a guiding focus toward his life. I thought that was cleverly done. And I like that they showed some growth for Sylvie. She's like, okay, I'm not gonna kill him this time. We're gonna see where this plays out. So I like that. They were able to influence her, and I liked how there was sort of this conflict or jealousy with Miss Minutes and Renslayer. I thought that was funny because she's been there, for, we don't really know how long, for ages. Apparently, she was, Miss Minutes was with He Who Remains, right? So she's sort of attached like a jealous puppy or something. this AI. I like how they played with her. It's like, she's this obvious thing that stands out in the world, right? Especially back in time where there's this ghost clock that's there. How weird is that? And they're like, well, you don't really fit in. And then she changes to like this black and white, simpler version of her. I thought that was funny. Yeah, there's a lot of cool things in this episode that I liked. I liked, again, continuing the relationship between the characters. Ouroboros is back and fun again. Yeah, I thought this episode, for me, was much better. I thought it flowed better. It was, equally. I think they do a good job of keeping them entertaining. They're fairly consistent from that perspective, blending the humor with the drama and with the tension of things going wrong and what are we going to do next and all that stuff. I like that we see some more background with the He Who Remains character, though I'm a little confused. Is this version of He Who Remains, how does he relate to the one we saw before, and why this one? I mean, I guess the one that we saw, in the original in the first series, the first season, he obviously knows about this one, right? So it's maybe this is the least violent and power hungry of the other variations of him that are out there, and that's why he chose this one. But also is this one in our Earth of the universe? I guess so, right? Because he's on the sacred timeline. But then that's kind of weird, because if he's on the sacred timeline, wouldn't the He Who Remains, who we saw on the first season, wouldn't he have been from the sacred timeline? Yeah, so I'm a little confused as to how he relates to the one we saw. But I like the background. I like that the actor played the character so differently from the super confident one we saw before. Yeah, I thought there's a lot. It's very interesting. You do a great job of keeping you on your toes in the show and keeping things off balance and off kilter.
Yes.
So yeah. Anyway, yes, I like this episode. A lot of little things like that. But I'm curious to see, what are your thoughts on this episode?
I enjoyed this episode as well, though I still found it a little confusing. I really enjoyed the fact that we were catching up with Renslayer and Miss Minutes from the get-go. We got to see what she was doing, where she was going, because we saw her in the first episode and then she vanished. I almost kind of wish they had taken elements of this episode and elements of the previous episode and mixed them up and almost, had a little mini arc between the two episodes. I think that would have made both of them maybe flow a little better. I was really excited to see her and see what she was up to and see where Miss Minutes were. And you got the feeling initially that they were on their own mission of good. And then towards the end, it didn't feel like that anymore. And I was still trying to pinpoint where I felt like it was a mission of bad. And I think it's when Miss Minutes dumped Renslayer, and then Renslayer came back during Miss Minutes' little psychopathic rant about wanting a body. That's when, like for me, the feeling of what they were doing shifted, and it was no longer something that in their mind was a good thing to do. And it was like, no, they know this is not a good thing to do. So I really enjoyed that because, you know, usually when you're presenting your counterpart to your protagonist, whether it's a villain or not, maybe a villain because of their actions, but they don't consider themselves villains. That's what I thought was happening at the beginning of the episode. And then it twisted. And then all of a sudden I'm thinking maybe they think they're villains and they know they're villains and they know they're against anyway, it was really interesting. I agree. The Timely character was very fascinating, and I agree. I thought the same thing. The fact that the actor made this character so different than He Who Remains, about like where he fits on the timeline. You know, He Who Remains could have come from any timeline. At the end of time, he's at the end of all timelines, right? So he could have been from any dimension. Timeline? I don't know. So I think it worked for me. It was okay. It worked for me that this Timely was in the sacred timeline that was on our Earth. I think that worked okay. But it really begs the question, how important is this guy? I mean, we know he's important to the TVA right now because they need his temporal aura to fix the loom. But why did Renslayer and Miss Minutes go find him? What difference does it make if this guy is in existence or not? And so that's what I think is really at the foundation of that I really want to know. Why is this guy so important? I mean, yeah, he created TVA, but that's been created, so why go back and get him again?
Right. Yeah, I was wondering the same thing, like, because I was thinking from He Who Remains, the sort of battle among him and his variants, were people in the future who had lots of technology and lots of understanding of the universe and lots of power and lots of knowledge about how things work. And here's this guy back in the day who's just, messing around with like Edison and Tesla era level technology. It's like, what is he going to do? He's obviously wouldn't on his own rise to become a multiversal player.
Right.
So it does open that question. It also makes me wonder, like you said, when Renslayer gets booted out on the little boat, is this actually He Who Remains' plan? Or is Miss Minutes kind of going rogue and doing something on her own here?
Or both.
For her own... Yeah, or is it some combination of things? Yeah. So I'm interested to see where that goes. Yeah. But yeah, I agree with you. I don't know.
I also thought using Miss Minutes as a ghost to distract from what was going on, taking advantage of sort of the supernatural, or the superstitious is the word I'm looking for, the superstition of the local people, was a little bit of a cynical act on the part of Renslayer and Miss Minutes. Really interesting to me that was the choice they would make in order to get out of whatever the issue was. They hold a tempad. They hold all kinds of things, and that's how they choose to distract people. I thought was really, really interesting, and I was wondering how that might play out, or if that's just like a little thing that they built in for fun. Because it was fun, like watching her go sepia-colored to fit with the time. That was fun. I also really enjoyed how, like you said, Sylvie had some character change. She didn't kill Renslayer, even though she could have, but in a way she kind of did. She sent her to the end of time, which is where they wanted to send Sylvie when they pruned her. And so I thought that was an interesting choice. That was probably, to me, one of the best moments in the whole episode, was that twist of sending her to the end of time into He Who Remains' castle, where his moldering corpse lies after Sylvie killed him. which is interesting. How does time pass at the end of time? So it's sort of like,
Yeah, he's been there for a while, right?
I thought that was one of the best parts of the episode. And then I really liked how you really got to see that Miss Minutes is just not a nice character. When she said, I know a secret and it's going to make you really mad, her true nature is coming out. And you saw that a little bit in season 1 where she was a little bit sadistic. And it's coming out a lot more now. I liked her backstory. I liked Miss Minutes' backstory. I liked, we got to see more layers of these characters.
Oh, yeah.
To some degree. Mobius and Loki were the least layer revealing elements in this particular episode. Yeah, but I actually enjoyed that. So I didn't think there was any real problem with that.
Yeah, I agree. It was, the focus shifted off of them a bit, right?
Yeah. So was there anything that you would have done differently in this episode?
There's some questions I had. Again, it's kind of like we mentioned in the first episode of this season, where there's things where I'm wondering about how this works or where this goes, and it's like it could be they set these up well, or it could be an issue if it doesn't get explained later, maybe, or if they contradict themselves. But it's hard to say without knowing where they're going. The one thing I wondered was at the end, right, when Sylvie puts Renslayer there at the end of time, right? So she just opened a door there. Does that mean that they could have done that? Like anybody could have done that before? It seemed like that wasn't the case. So did Sylvie modify her temp pad to be able to do that, or because she was already there, she had some kind of lock on that location or something? That seemed like a plot hole. They opened right from before. There was no one going back and forth to that location before, and there was no indication that they could do that. But maybe because she was there and she opened a door from there, she now had a lock on that. I don't know. So anyway, that was just something that made me wonder, oh, wait, if they could just go back and forth here all the time now, that changes everything. so it's interesting to see if they're going to use that again. Now that Renslayer's there, does she ever temp pad? Can she just temp pad out of there? Presumably she could if she has it.
Didn't Sylvie take He Who Remains temp pad?
Oh, I don't. Is that what happened? I don't remember.
I don't know. I know that's what she used to send Loki back. Did she take it?
Oh, then that's probably she had it then, so she just used that to go wherever she wanted. That would make sense.
Which also then answers the question I have, which is how the heck did she find this timely variant? But maybe the temp pad. I would guess. I don't think there's any real evidence of this, but I would guess that He Who Remains temp pad is going to be like a master temp pad, like a master key, and so have characteristics or qualities that are going to be slightly more advanced than everybody else's temp pad.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, I'm just guessing.
Yeah. No, but that brings up another point that I had too, was how does she get there? Not how does she get there, but how does she know where they were at that time? Because we saw them investigating. So I guess we just, it's implied that she can do the same thing. And she's like, okay, I'm tracking these people. This is where they went, and I just go there after them. I guess that's reasonable as well.
Yeah.
Let me think. Is there anything I would change? I don't think I noticed anything as I was watching it. Probably, this, I think as we've seen with these first 3 episodes, it's probably one of those cases where you have to go through it again because there's a lot going on to see okay, does this all make sense? Is this connected right? Are they setting it up well? Yeah, I don't have anything else, at least nothing that I've written down. If you say something, maybe it'll spark something in my head. What about you? Are there things that you're like, oh, I would have changed this, I would have done this differently?
Well, and I already kind of mentioned what I think I might have done. I think I might have combined elements of the last 2 episodes together and had different scenes that moved these arcs forward. Because again, I kind of lost the mission about halfway through this. Why are we here again? Oh, right. They're trying to find Miss Minutes because she knows everything about the TVA so she can fix the loom. But that part got lost a little bit because we started off with Renslayer giving the TVA handbook to Timely. So then I was headed off in a different direction. And then when Loki and Mobius show up, I'm like, why are they here again? Maybe I'm just not paying attention. That could be possible. I'm just not paying enough attention to this and I'm losing the flow of what's going on. in the story. I don't know.
Yeah, it's always tricky with anything where they're hopping through time, and different parties have their own agenda, right? Because you're right. It's like we see Renslayer and Miss Minutes, and they leave the handbook there, and you're like, okay, that's one thing that's going on, which is kind of, I think this is the first time we see what they're up to, right?
Yeah.
In this season. So it's like, oh, okay, they're doing something here, and then you kind of figure out pretty quickly, it's like, okay, they're giving it to a young version of this guy, and he's going to learn from this and grow into whatever they need him to be, They kind of on that. And then on the other, on the Loki side of things, okay, they're tracking down, and they're not necessarily going after Renslayer particularly, although, maybe that's a mission like in the back of their minds. Like you said, it's like, we need the entity that knows how all this stuff works, right? And can maybe get us around any blocked doors that we need to bypass. So they kind of assume they're working together, so they go there and they're after them. And then there's the whole thing with Timely. We get a bit with him doing his whole show and presentation, and then people are after him. So I can see how it's kind of going in different directions. And I can see how that's also hard to follow. And then once they get there, of course, they're like, oh, this guy has the same genetics. We can just use him. We don't need Miss Minutes anymore. Her Renslayer. It's like, that's it, right? And that's smart. Like an unexpected bonus. It's like, oh, we've got what we need. We'll go straight to the source. This guy can give us access to everything. Because they get separated, and because we get time with Miss Minutes and Renslayer and Timely, it's like it kind of separates off again. So yeah, there's a lot going on, right? And they're trying to give us more background to these characters. So I could see, for me, I was kind of like, okay, I was going along with the ride on this one a little bit better, but I can see how it's kind of the same as the last episode too, where there are these different plot threads happening at the same time.
I think what I would have done differently is I would have had Loki and Mobius have a conversation about why they thought Miss Minutes was there. Right at the beginning, instead of talking about Balder the Brave, have a conversation about what is she doing in 1893 and have them do some analysis. I think that would have grounded us in where they're still hunting for Miss Minutes. They know Miss Minutes, because Loki saw her in the castle at the end of time. They know Miss Minutes is connected with He Who Remains. So I think there should have been some conversation about why is she here, and at least grounding them in their analytical abilities, which is very good, or at least it has been in the past. Both of them are excellent at analyzing motivations and outcomes. I would have liked to have seen that. And then the same thing happen when we meet Timely. Why are they here for this guy? And have just a little bit of conversation analyzing those two things. I think that would have grounded, not only would have been consistent with their characters, but it would have grounded us as the consumers of the story as to how things are changing, why they're there, what's going on, and how things are changing.
Yeah, that's a great note. And it's something I think we've talked about before, maybe with this, where I feel like the writers are creating these stories, right? And it's clear in their head what's going on, right? They know everything that's happening, what the characters are doing, and there's maybe a lot of respect for the viewer to keep up with things that are happening, right? What this character's doing, what that character's doing, and maybe it would be better if they had a little less respect for the viewer and reiterated things for a few times. This is the thing that we said last time, I think, was remind the viewer what the goals are of the characters, right? And it's a new episode, and it's a week later. It's like you may not have remembered exactly everything that happened last week, and even with the summaries, you missed some of the details. So having a little bit of reminder dialogue in there, like you said, would help the flow.
It doesn't even have to be, overt exposition. It can be, why is Miss Minutes in 1893? What made her choose to come here? And so then the viewer will remember, oh, right, Miss Minutes knows about the TVA. That's why we're after her. I think that's what I'm kind of talking about there, is even just That's just the slightest touch of exposition, but it's still very consistent with the characters to stop and ask the question. What is your takeaway as a writer?
For me, again, it follows on what we said last week. Focus, right? Like I feel like this episode was a little more focused, right? All of our characters came together in the same place and same time, mostly, and we got to see them interacting. So it brought the plot lines together a bit, even though it kind of then branched out again. So that's one thing. And I would now, discussing this more with you, I would also take away the thing we just discussed, which is having little reminders of what's going on in your story. And I think this is important for novels, especially, where, you're halfway through the novel, you're trying to introduce twists and turns maybe, and you have, A plot, B plot, whatever, subplots going on. It's a good thing to have your characters every once in a while just do what you said. Ask a question. So what are we doing now? Right? Like, that didn't work. Our plan to do this thing, you say it, failed. Now what are we going to do? I mean, you don't have to be that overt, but it's good to have those reminders throughout the story to keep the reader or the viewer grounded as to what's going on. I think for me, that's a good takeaway.
And mine is exactly the same. My note is keep the objectives clear. Yeah,
that's crucial. And like I said, I think if you were watching this maybe episode, back to back to back, it wouldn't be as difficult to follow, perhaps. We get this sometime in our local critique group because we'll submit excerpts to each other, right? And then we'll review those excerpts. And it's maybe a chapter or a scene or, 10 pages, something like this. And if you're doing that for novels, every 2 weeks, however often, your group meets, for us, it's 2 weeks. Even if someone who's writing the story is submitting an excerpt every 2 weeks, 2 weeks have gone by, you're doing other stuff with your life, and then it's like you're reading another excerpt from your story. It's like, wait, what was going on in this story again? So it's good to have that in a novel. Yeah, I mean, you don't need to do it that frequently, but it is valuable to keep the reader's focus on what's happening.
Today we're talking about the story told in Loki, Season 2, Episode 4, Heart of the TVA. And I will read the short synopsis that comes up when you type in Loki Season 2, Episode 4. The TVA's loom nears catastrophic failure. But Loki, Mobius, and Sylvie have a He Who Remains variant. So what'd you think about this episode, Mike?
Oh, they had some really fun things in this episode. One thing that I noticed, which I didn't mention in previous episodes in this season, but I thought was pretty funny, was that I love that they have this weird animated clock that's become one of the important players in the story.
Yeah.
It's just like, here's this AI thing that just floats around as this ghost clock, and now it's like a major character. I thought that was really cool, and I'm glad that they're carrying that character through. It's very interesting. Yeah, so there's a lot of little things like this that I liked. I love the fact that we learned that Renslayer was at the side of He Who Remains when setting all this up, and she essentially got pruned to be put into the TVA.
Yeah.
Because, we didn't know, right? There's always this open question of what did these characters do before they were in the TVA? And she was pretty instrumental, which kind of makes sense given her position there. But like Miss Minutes said at the end of the last episode, you're going to be really angry when you find out who you were. Yeah. So I wasn't expecting that. I thought that was a nice twist. So that they gave the handbook to Timely, and then Ouroboros gets it from him, and there was this whole snake eating its own tail question of, wait, who created this thing if you got it from him and he got it from you, right? That's literally the Ouroboros, right? Which shows us why that character had that name, which is awesome. I like how we see that Renslayer is still completely ruthless. She'll do what she needs to do to get things done and to get it her way. So that character continues to be interesting, and I'm interested to see where she goes. Like, what's her reaction going to be now that she knows more of what's going on? And then again, I liked the upping of the stakes that they continue to do, and how there's just this doom at the end of the episode when the loom falls apart and breaks, and there's this big explosion. Once again, where is this going to go? It looks bad. So yeah, I think they filled us in on some interesting information. They brought some things to bear. They explained why, why characters were where they are, and had their names, and then give us a big boom at the end. So I liked it. I enjoyed this episode.
I like that, the big boom at the end. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. I loved this episode. I would venture to say that this is one of the best episodes we've seen in this series. And I think it's because it slowed down a bit and allowed us great character performances. I mean, we got good stuff from almost every character. And it was just so enjoyable to sink your teeth into it and wonder what was going to happen next. There were surprises at every turn. And things that we weren't expecting. And it was just really enjoyable. Like I said, one of the best episodes, I believe, in this series. I thought the open was impactful and informative. We did not waste any time. We jumped right in, and we got new motivation for Renslayer, and we got new information for, the overarching mystery of the whole series. Like you just said, we have sort of some really great references in these folks' name, like Ouroboros, which is an image of a snake eating its own tail. If you type in Ouroboros on Google, that's what pops up. We've got Mobius, right? Mobius is the idea of the Mobius strip that's never ending. It's kind of a visual trick of something that never ends, always goes around. And so how does that relate to his character? Now that we see what Ouroboros' name means, as far as he wrote the TVA handbook based on the work of Timely, who did his work based on the TVA handbook that he got slipped to him by Renslayer. I mean, so you've got that, going in circle thing. I believe that's called bootstrapping in time travel tropes. If somebody knows if that's correct or not, please go ahead and leave a comment and let us know if I'm remembering that correctly. And then I went ahead and looked up Renslayer. Because Slayer is clear, right? We've got somebody who slays something, who ends something, who destroys something.
Right.
And Ren can mean joy or good.
That's ominous.
So we've got somebody who's... Yes! It really is! So I kind of wonder what that means for that character, because they've been very thoughtful in their name choices. And like you, I thought the ending was fantastic. It was so not what I was expecting. Timely is standing there saying, time to be brave, time to be brave. He's going to go and fix the loom because he understands the technology, because he created a version of this in 1893. And then, poof, he's gone. And the loom explodes. And we zoom in on Loki's face, the anguish, the fear, the surprise. Powerful. Boom at the end. Yeah. I really like this episode.
Yeah, me too. I mean, those are all great notes. And just commenting about the end, it's just the surprise they all felt like, what just happened? He's gone? That's not good. Yeah, so as far as what I would improve. So like you, I thought this was one of the best episodes. I was thoroughly engaged. It's kind of like when we were talking about Stargate, right? And we hit certain episodes where it's like, I'm in the whole episode, just all following them along with the ride. And that's how I felt with this one. I didn't have any notes on what they can improve. I mean, if I went back and watched
and
it
again,
okay. maybe there'd be some things I could nitpick going through it again. But certainly, I mean, we've had little notes on earlier episodes of the season. But this one, I was with them the whole time. I thought it was well done. Like you said, great performances, good character stuff, lots of surprises and things brought to light. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I don't have a note for improvement on this one. How about you?
I just have one thing, and that is that in this episode, we do a callback to the first episode of this season where Loki was time slipping, and they had this fun little series of tasks that had to be completed to stop his time slipping, one of which was that he needed to be pruned at the appropriate moment so that he would come back out of the loom. And he lost his pruning device, his pruning fork. What else should we call that? Pruning stick?
Yeah.
Pruning prod?
The prod, anyway, the baton, something.
Yeah, anyway, he lost it just as he was the alarm went off and he was supposed to be pruned and he doesn't know what he's going to do. And an elevator opens right next to him as a phone is ringing and he sees Sylvie and then he gets pruned. That's what happened in the first episode of the series. Now we're getting a callback to that because he is the one who prunes himself. In this episode, he picks up a pruning prod and sees himself and realizes what he has to do. And just as Sylvie's opening the door, he prunes himself. And then the phone keeps ringing, and of course they're going to answer the phone. That particular scene, I thought was slightly too slow, considering the momentum of the rest of the episode. And since those of us who had been watching it, we knew what was going to happen. There's Loki standing there with his back to the Loki with the pruning prod, and Sylvie's opening the elevator. I kind of wished it just would go a little faster, because the rest of the episode was really tight and moved quickly. And then it took forever for them to answer the phone. I was yelling at the television, answer the phone!
Yes, that's true.
I would have liked that have been just a little bit faster. Other than that, like you, I had no other notes because I thought this was a really good episode. So what are your takeaways as a writer from this episode?
Yeah, one thing, probably the main thing I take away from this is don't be afraid to go big, right? Don't be afraid. It's like I think sometimes when writing, maybe there's this fear of getting into a situation where you can't get yourself out of, but those are often the most interesting places to go, right? Make it horrible. Do something awful and let's see how you can get out of this. And that's kind of where they left us at the end of this episode. Boom, the whole thing blows up.
That's such a great observation. That's such a great observation.
What is your takeaway or takeaways from this one?
It to me, it was a reminder again of how important it is to let the characters drive the story. Because this episode, that's what happened. And that's what made it so good. The characters were consistent with what we've seen in the past, and everything they did is what moved the story forward. And so it's just a great reminder that focus on the characters. Let the characters do what they're going to do.
Yeah, great point.
But, your point of don't be afraid to go big is very well taken. And I have a chapter I'm working on today where, things are dicey. And I think I'm going to go big and have something blow up. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
Let's begin. Today we're talking about the story told in Loki Season 2, Episode 5, Science Fiction. And I will read the brief synopsis that comes up when you type that into Google. Loki traverses dying timelines in an attempt to find his friends, but reality is not what it seems. Did you like this episode?
Yeah, I did like this episode. Again, I thought there was a lot of fun things that are happening. I mean, I think the writers really, you can tell they enjoy writing for this series because there's a lot of clever things, a lot of fun in the show and with the characters. And then we see immediately from the beginning of the episode sort of the aftermath that's starting to occur from the previous episode where the whole TVA is unraveling, sort of becoming like strands of spaghetti, flexible spaghetti, as everything kind of unwinds. And it was an interesting visual and very disturbing. And I think it worked for getting across this sense of doom that's occurring. And then, much like the last episode, we get to see more of some of what the characters are. We learn why Mobius was so into jet skis when he was in the TVA. That was funny. And we also learn why Ouroboros knows what time slipping is, because he gets introduced to it in this episode in his past. We see that he becomes aware of what it was in his other persona, which is interesting. It's almost like his persona remembers something from before he was at the TVA. So I'm interested to see how that goes. Is he like?
And yeah, it's almost like he's almost the same.
Yeah, it's like, is he like one of these rare people who carries over, where it's like he remembers at least some of what he was?
I mean,
before?
unlike Casey,
right,
who's completely different.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, character's totally different. And then there's a lot of good humor. I love how he's Loki's off, time slips somewhere else, and then Ouroboros comes back. He's like, "How did you build a tempad so fast?" He's like, "I don't know if I'd say 18 months is fast," because from Loki's perspective, it just happened. So I love that. I love that they play with time things like that, because that's exactly what it would be like. It's like, you don't know how much time's passed. So I thought that was funny. And then from a character's perspective, we get to learn more about Loki, right? It's like he doesn't want to be alone. He wants his friends back. It's like this moving motivation for his character. It's not just, I want power, right? The Loki that we saw from before. It's like, I want people to bow to me. It's like, no, he wants connection, which is very different. We get to see the growth of him. And there was a small moment in this which reminded me of a comment one of us made regarding the first season, where, remember the first season at the end when they're fighting the big storm monster? I forget what it was called at the end of time. Alioth, yes, thank you. And he's trying to learn how to enchant it or something like that. And then he just does at some point, right? There's no like real reason for it. It's like, oh, this time I did it and it worked. Whereas here in this episode, we see him learning a new skill, but we understand why he learns it at that moment, because of something that he grows into. So I thought that was done better this time. But yeah, overall, I liked this episode. I thought it was fun. Again, they introduced new things. They carried on well from the previous episode. Yeah, that's it. So what about you? What are your thoughts? Did you dislike?
I liked this episode. I liked it a lot. I still think the previous episode was slightly better, but only slightly better. I think the groundwork that has been laid so far this season is really starting to come to fruition in these last two episodes, in episode 4 and episode 5. One of my notes was wonderfully confusing instead of overwhelmingly confusing, which is what happened in, I think it was Breaking Bad. It was just so overwhelmingly confusing as to what was going on. It took away from the enjoyment of the episode, whereas here, I had no idea what was going on. Loki started time slipping again. Don't know why, but he's time slipping into the very specific places, so we know there's a reason. We're pulled into the mystery of what's happening, and so every single step is painting another puzzle piece for us. That is a lot of fun to try to figure out. So that was my first note. Wonderfully confusing. It was a fun ride to figure out what was going on. And once again, the stakes were raised again. Every time you think the stakes couldn't be raised anymore, they keep raising the stakes. And like you said, the spaghettified timelines were vivid in how they presented how scary this was. These are coming after you. They're coming after you to tear you apart, tear you out of time, make you disappear. That scene at the record shop where the record shop owner is trying to get to Sylvie because the sneaky timelines are chasing him, was delightful, vivid, exciting, scary. I mean, it just totally rammed home exactly what this is about. Because that guy was us. He was your everyman.
Yes.
who was being wiped out by the disintegration of the loom. It was wonderful. I really enjoyed that. I loved the glimpses into each of their former lives and how different or the same they were, because that was making their survival even more important to us. I love how Casey, who is like the TVA rule follower, he fanboyed over Ouroboros when he met Ouroboros because he is the TVA rule follower. He follows that TVA handbook.
Yeah.
After he was an escaped prisoner from Alcatraz who liked to
awesome.
rob banks. I mean, it was so awesome. You know, he was completely different. And Mobius, who seems like just a really, in his previous life, he was just kind of a laid back, fun guy dealing with life's issues. He's got 2 kids who are kind of struggling a little bit, and he's divorced, and he's trying to sell jet skis. Very different from the focused TVA agent he was going to become, who could predict the god of mischief's every move. I mean, it's just an entirely different character. Now, he's still kind of laid back.
Yeah.
He's still got a sense of humor, but his focus is very different than amiable jet ski guy. Now, I would like to have seen more of B-15. And that's the one note I have as far as like what I might have done differently, but we'll talk about that when we get to that section. And the other thing that I think was fascinating is something that you raised about how Loki seems to be learning more and more of what he can do. And we're seeing this interwoven with 2 themes. One is he's going to lose because that's what he does. He's the god of losing. That's the message that we've been getting. And the other one is that he's going to grow. And I think what we're seeing is that by accepting he's going to lose, he becomes a hero. And our previous Loki, through all the movies, believed he was supposed to be a king. He was already supposed to be a hero. He was battling his brother, the hero, trying to be the hero. And now he's actually becoming the hero by accepting that he was going to lose. It's just absolutely wonderful.
Yeah, I agree.
This is such good character writing.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm trying to take notes of this left, right, and center.
They're doing a good job of like pushing the character in the direction they want him to go, right? Like having him learn from his experiences and the stressors around them. I mean, that's what your book should do. That's what your movie should do. That's what your TV show should do.
So what might you have done differently, if anything?
I didn't have too many notes on this episode as far as differences or improving it. The one thing that came to mind is it did make me wonder, you know, as they were interacting with these other characters and going to different time periods and dealing with this sort of, you know, universe level ending situation, if Loki wouldn't take the opportunity to return to Asgard or to Thor, whether to request help or whether to, you know, as he's becoming aware of, you know, who he was in the past, whether to apologize or some kind of connection to his past. While everyone else we're seeing their connections to their past, he's very disconnected from his past in this show. They mentioned it at the very beginning, like in episode 1, and then that's it. We're into the Loki universe now, and we're following him along. But because we're seeing glimpses into these other time periods, into the other characters' lives, it made me wonder about him and his past life, and was he ever going to touch upon that again? Are we ever going to see him connect to that again? I feel like there probably will be something, maybe at the end of the series. But we'll see. We'll see where he's going to go. But you know, it seemed like there would be an opportunity to do so, right? If not in this episode, then certainly at some point in the future. I'd like to see it touch back into his previous life at some point. But that was it.
I love that. What a great observation. And you're absolutely right. And when you were saying that, I was visualizing what might happen. And I think if I could rule the world for a day, I think it might be at the end, after they sorted everything out, that he and Sylvie despite the weirdness of it, come together in a relationship, and that he takes her to introduce her to his mom.
That'd be cool.
Just like Thor went back in time and spent some time with his mom. I think it would be really cool if Loki did the same thing, sort of mirroring that action, what happened there. Because it helped heal Thor. And I would love it if it was Loki going to his mom to show her he was healed.
That would be great.
And it would be really cool if she said, "Oh, you're a Loki too," right? Because she was raised by witches. She sees with more than her eyes, right? So when you were saying that was the vision I had in my head was, oh, wouldn't that be fun? Now, will that happen? Who knows? But that was the inspiration you gave with your excellent point, because that's a really good point. We do need to see Loki coming to terms with his past.
Yeah, we need a
and his history.
Yeah, we need a connection to his previous life, right? Even if it's just to realize that's not his life anymore. Like he's grown beyond the need to be, that person that he was. Something. Anyway, that was my thought. So you had some thought on how to improve this episode or tweak this episode.
I would have liked to have seen how Loki persuaded B-15 to join them. We got to see him persuading Casey. Sort of. We got to see him persuade Ouroboros, but he didn't actually persuade Ouroboros. Ouroboros, totally clued in.
Yeah.
And was like, oh, this is cool.
He's just kind of along for the ride.
I want a piece of this action.
Yes.
He had to persuade Mobius. And he used Mobius's kids as the leverage. And one of the things about Loki is that he is a master manipulator. And so I would have liked to have seen a little bit more focus on those skills used for good. Just a little bit. And I think it was fine. I mean, we're just talking, pie in the sky kind of stuff. But I would have liked to have seen how he convinced B-15, because she was a doctor. And doctors are well-educated people who are grounded in practicality and facts, and I think it would have been a tough sell to get her to come. And I would have liked to have seen him use his powers of persuasion on her. And I would also be interested in learning a little bit more about her. I mean, we got that great glimpse of Casey as the, escaped prisoner from Alcatraz versus the rule follower at the TVA, and Mobius as, easygoing jet ski salesman versus focused TVA agent.
Yeah, that's true.
When we first met B-15 in the first season, she was ruthless in her pruning. No nonsense. You're pruned. We're done.
Yes.
And she's a doctor in her real life. But doctors can be ruthless too.
Yeah.
Because they have to. Because if they're going to save a patient, they may have to be ruthless to a body part, right? Yeah. So is she different? Is she not? Is she like Ouroboros, where she carries that sort of focus and intensity from her previous life into the TVA? I don't know. And I would have liked to have seen a little bit more of that.
Yeah, that's a very good note. I do like what they did with when Loki comes back and he's like, well, I'm just going to return you to your previous life. You need to live your lives, right? And Mobius is like, wait, didn't you say my kids are going to be killed if we don't do anything? Right? It's like they didn't lose the thread there of why they're doing this. I thought that was good.
So what is your takeaway from this episode as a writer?
My takeaway is probably similar to what I think you were mentioning before in one of the previous episodes, last one or the one before, that it's a good reminder that at the end of the day, ultimately, most stories are about the people, right? Are about the characters. And we get to see insights into each of these characters, and it draws us as the viewers into it more, because we've been wanting that. I think we saw these people in the TVA, and then it's revealed that, they were actually people on the timeline. So then that immediately raised the question of, who were these people? So it's great to finally get that revealed here, or not finally, when we saw some of that in last episode, but to see more of that, okay, here's the rest of the characters, and here's who they were. And I mean, at the end of the day, this is a story is about people doing things, right? Travails that characters are going through. And this episode reminded me of that. How about you? What do you take away?
Very similar. My note was keep it grounded in the relationships. And these two last episodes have done a wonderful job of balancing the excitement and thrills of a science fiction universe and time travel story with those relationships and those characters.
Yes.
So the balance has been really good in these two episodes.
Yeah, I agree.
Let's begin. Today we're talking about a story told in Loki Season 2, Episode 6, Glorious Purpose. And I will read the very short summary that comes up when you type in Loki Season 2, Episode 6. Loki learns the true nature of glorious purpose as he rectifies the past to save the future. Did you like this episode?
Yes, I did like this episode. For me, it was almost like two episodes. There was the first part, which we get the sort of now familiar time loop type of story. And that has this sort of humor from the series that we've come to expect. And it's kind of a fun replay of events as Loki tries to solve this problem, going back again and again through time. I like those. I tend to like those kind of stories, even though they tend to be very similar. But I thought they did it well here. And then there's a more serious latter part of the story. In the first part, there's some great lines, some funny lines that they just throw out and move on. Like, this is the TVA handbook. You both wrote it. Isn't that amazing? And then he just moves on, just cutting through the story really quick. Or it looks like Mobius, but it's actually Victor Timely regarding the little character that he made. Just great callbacks to previous episodes. I thought those were really funny. And there's a few other lines like that in this first part, which I really enjoyed. And then the story kind of changes, right? It becomes more serious in tone as we push toward the finale. And what we get at the end, ultimately, for me, was surprising. The end of where they went with the story. I feel like I should have seen the setup for where they were going, but I missed it. And that's great. That's what you want in your story, right? You don't want people to say, oh, here's how it's going to end, and just know from the beginning. But you want enough seeds planted so that by the time you get to there at the end of the story, it's like, oh, right. That's why they set it up like this in the beginning. And it all kind of makes sense and comes back to where it kind of is like a circle, right? And I thought they did that well. It's, you get to the end and it seems like an obvious conclusion, but it's surprising when you get it. Yeah, the end was very different in tone. It ends on a very weighty, heavy finale, right? With Loki basically sacrificing himself for the good of the multiverse, which is like a very huge concept. What this character becomes. He claims a throne. It's just not the one that he or anyone else expected. And it was very big, very epic. I have some other thoughts, under the what you might improve section, but we'll get to that. Overall, I liked it. So yeah, but I'm curious to see what you thought of it.
Well, I'm going to disagree with you on one thing. It's because I don't think Loki sacrificed himself for the multiverse. He sacrificed himself for his friends.
Yeah, that is true. That's a good point.
That's what I took away from it. It was all about Mobius and Casey and Obi and Sylvie. I don't think had it been the multiverse that he would have done it. And I think that goes to the character of Loki. Loki's not about being the great hero that Thor is throughout all the 9 realms, right? He's about himself and has always been about himself. And himself did not want to lose these people that he had grown to care about. And so the fact that he ended up saving the multiverse was, a bonus, but I'm not sure that was what was driving him. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I think I think it became about that, right? I think it started with him realizing he cares about his friends, right? These people. But I think it expanded beyond that to realize he can learn to care in general, right? Because he could have just kept the sacred timeline and his friends would have been fine. But he went beyond that, expanded even more, and said, you know what? Everybody deserves this chance. And he was the only one who could give it to them.
And
yes.
I think you're right. And I think, yeah. And that actually does fit the whole arc. We have this character who Loki wants a throne. And he wants to be, knelt in front of, right? When we see him in the first Avengers, he's like, kneel, and isn't this your place? You want to be kneeling before someone in charge. And then when he in Ragnarok, and he comes with the ship, and he's like, your savior is here, right? He wants to be the hero, but he doesn't want to make the sacrifices necessary. The sacrificing of his own comfort, his own resources. He doesn't want to do that. And then at the end here, he becomes a hero by sacrificing himself. But the primary driver is this small reward instead of the big reward.
Yeah, that's man, those are good points. Because you're right. Originally, it was all about him, right? Like that's who his character was. Worship me. I deserve this. I should be the king, the god, whatever. Bow down to me. And then at the end, where do we see him? He does this totally selfless act, and nobody will even know about it, right? Other than the handful of people who knew what he did. He saved the multiverse, gave everyone a chance at life, and completely thankless. Like no one will ever know. Yeah, that's a huge, huge change in his character. I thought they did that well.
Yeah, I agree. So other things that I liked about it, it was intense from the very beginning. Even from like the backwards Marvel logo piece right at the very beginning. And I also wondered if the music was backwards. I couldn't really tell if it was just new music that was created or the Loki music that was, composed backwards now. Or what, but it was like right from the very beginning, it set a very intense tone. Running
Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't catch that. I will say, I almost always just skip the opening sequence, but something this time made me watch it all the way through. It was like, I don't know, because it was different, it caught my attention. I was like, oh, where's this going with this? But yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe they did reversed it or something like that. That's a good catch.
Yeah. And I think your point of how it almost felt like two episodes, because you have the first part where the time looping is, and he's trying to figure out how to fix things by becoming an expert in physics and all of the, things that you need to become an expert in to be able to find out a mechanical solution, because that's what they were looking for, was a mechanical solution to this problem. I thought that was a lot of fun. And then all of a sudden it switches gears. And it becomes this incredibly interesting philosophical debate with He Who Remains. And they lead you to believe that it's actually going to come down to a decision whether to save Sylvie or not.
Right.
But that's not where it ended up going. So that was sort of like a fake. And then sending it off into a different direction, which I thought was really fascinating. And then, again, like you said, the end was epic in scope with Loki making this sacrifice and doing so in a way that was clearly difficult and requiring a lot of his energy, a lot of his focus, a lot of himself. And I love that he got a throne in what is it, the Dark World. Odin says to him, all this because Loki desires a throne. Well, Loki got his throne.
Yes.
Really, really interesting episode. Definitely. And as we've noticed, they raised the stakes every single episode this season, and they did the same thing again here. The stakes were raised higher than they were ever done before, and I thought that was really well done. I also really loved that when he finally got his throne, and he's got all these time threads. He's essentially the loom. He has become the loom. He's sitting on his throne, controlling the time threads. And the structure that he creates looks like the world tree. Yggdrasil, that's it. That we see in the original in the original Captain America movie, when the Red Skull goes to Norway to find the Tesseract, it's hidden behind a wall panel depicting the world tree, Yggdrasil. And then we hear about that again in Thor, about how the 9 realms could be construed as being part connected by this tree. And then we see this again with Loki.
Oh, that's awesome. I didn't even catch that. That's good.
The other thing that I thought was really interesting is that Loki's magic is green. And the time stone was green. I don't know if that was purposeful or not. But I thought, I wonder if we're going to see a return of the time stone now for, like with Doctor Strange. Because Loki now has control of time with his magic. I don't know. It could be a coincidence.
Yeah. No, that's interesting.
I mean, the Marvel folks are known for planning way ahead. Though
yeah.
Not recently, but maybe this was planned. I don't know.
Yeah.
Was there anything that you would have done differently in this episode?
There's some small things. The one thing that I thought coming into as it neared the climax, when Loki sort of goes through whatever portal thing that he went through, this is something we've mentioned before in the series. I think someone saying something about what he was actually doing could have helped in that moment.
Yes.
I was like, what is going on? I didn't really get it until the end. I was like, I think this is what's happening, but I'm not sure. And then at the end, it's like, okay, I even still, I'm like, I think I understand what's happening. But some line, just giving us one sentence of explanation.
I agree.
Just to make it clear what's going on.
Sylvie said he's
nice.
saving us. So she understood what was happening.
Right.
She could have had that line.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, exactly. Because I like where they went with it. It just, clarity sometimes is good. Especially when there's so much going on throughout the series. Every once in a while, it's nice to have a grounding, right, of where we are and what we're seeing. I mean, I guess we've kind of figured it out right at the end, but just that explanation I think would have been nice, just some little bit there.
I agree.
This isn't a thing that I would improve. It's another thing I thought was kind of funny was here they are trying to salvage the loom, right, and make this thing work, when all along it was acting as a failsafe where if everything goes awry, boom, it just blows up all the other timelines and just preserves the sacred timeline. I thought that was funny, and a good reveal, and it shows how far ahead He Who Remains was from all of them, right? Even Loki coming back, it's he knew this was going to happen. He knew he was going to do the time slipping thing. He knew he was going to eventually figure it out. He knew they were going to have the discussion at the end. He may not have known exactly what it was going to be, but he knew they were going to get to this point at some point. I thought that was really cool. What would you improve?
I was actually left with a lot of unanswered questions. Why did Loki start time slipping in the first place? I don't think we ever got an answer to that. Sylvie pushed them through a portal, and the next thing you know, he's time slipping. Why? Was it because He Who Remains constructed that? Somehow made that possible? If so, I don't recall hearing that.
This happened.
Or learning that.
Yeah, I think this is another thing where a line of explanation could have helped that. I think we were supposed to get something from okay, because that event happened at the same time it exploded, he became unconnected in time or something. I don't know, but you're right. That would have been nice to have an explanation for.
Yeah. Because why didn't anybody else time slip then? I mean, Sylvie clearly left He Who Remains castle after she killed him. Why wasn't she time slipping? So I was just confused by that. I actually found the conversation between Loki and He Who Remains confusing. I was trying to figure out what is he saying here, and I didn't get it. And I guess what he was saying is that either I run the TVA or you run the TVA. Somebody's got to run it. I would have liked to have seen something more of Renslayer than just the sort of the last scene of her waking up at the end of time after having been pruned. She was such a formidable character in so many ways, and then she was just sort of, I don't know, she just sort of disappeared, which I thought to me was a little frustrating. She was He Who Remains like lieutenant during the war that he refers to. I would think that she would have bring more power to bear rather than just to wake up at the end of time, facing Eliath, and that's the end of her, which I don't think it is. And I would have liked to have seen something more. I would have liked to have seen her come back and throw some kind of wrench in the works as Loki's trying to fix things, and have that additional layer of intensity going on there, because she was such a powerful character. What happened to He Who Remains? If Loki takes over and is now the Loom, where's He Who Remains? What does that mean for him? And I don't think we got any explanation of that, but maybe I missed it.
Well, they said, it was like one quick line toward the end, where they said they were pruning the different versions of him. Presumably to keep the multiversal war from even happening, so that there didn't have to be a He Who Remains at the end, right? There didn't have to be one of them rising to control everything, because they were just going to keep them from getting to that point in the first place. That was my thought on it.
But time, as it's described in this show, is not linear. And so he already exists at the end of time. He existed at the end of time. Unless by Loki doing what he didn't change the fact that Sylvie killed him, which I guess is what happened. So the fact that Sylvie was there when he became the Loki Loom suggests that she still killed him. So maybe that's the answer to my question.
Yeah, I mean, it's always the problem with time travel stories, right? Inevitably, there's something that's like doesn't quite wrap up because the paradox.
Right.
I think that's why they left it a bit vague and timey-wimey kind of thing. But you're right. Again, I mean, this goes back to sort of a little bit more explanation, right? It's like, because I did feel this sort of unease at the end of the episode, like same thing, like I wanted more explanation for the wrap up. And I very much agree with you about the Renslayer. That's one point I wanted to bring up, which I had forgotten about, was like they set her up in, I forget which episode now, one of the episodes, when we see like her backstory briefly. It's almost like she's like a partner with He Who Remains, right? And then she just kind of disappears throughout this episode, and we just see, they're like, at the end, they're like, oh shoot, we forgot about this character. Well, let's just throw her at the end of the time. Okay. Yeah, I feel like there should have been more, but you're right. Maybe there's going to be more with her character in movies or in other shows or something. I haven't read these comics, so that last scene might be a setup for something to come.
And actually, that's a really good point, because as I understand it, the actor who plays He Who Remains is having some legal difficulties right now. And so it may be that Marvel takes a different tack, because Marvel and Disney are not real crazy about their actors having public relations issues.
Yeah, for sure.
So that may be, and
I
you know
also
what?
wonder how it affects.
I was going to say she would make a great villain.
Yeah, they set up a good character there.
Yeah.
So this is Kang, right? From the movie, from the Ant-Man movie?
Yes.
Same guy?
I believe so.
Yeah, so I could wonder how it relates to that, because at the end of, did you see that?
I did.
Ant-Man?
Quantumania?
Whatever it was, Quantumania?
Yes.
Yeah, so Quantumania, I mean, spoilers for anyone who hasn't seen that. We're going to talk about that for just a minute here. At the end of that, right, there's the whole multiverse of Kangs, presumably unleashed now to do whatever havoc they want to do. Like, how does that work with this? It seems like this kind of undoes that.
Yeah, exactly.
Like those Kangs are just going to get pruned out of existence. So it seems like they have a conflict now between their TV show and their movie series.
But they're not pruned out of existence. And that's the next point I wanted to make. They go to the end of time. So they're still there. And maybe they could all band together.
True.
So, or maybe, this would be cool. Maybe there will be like a war at the end of time with all the Lokis that got pruned and all the Kangs that got pruned there at the end of time. That'd be kind of fun. Because that was the other thing. I was like, what about the other Lokis that were all pruned and they're at the end of time? And we did kind of sort of get the answer to the question, why are all the Lokis being pruned? Because He Who Remains wanted one of them to step up and take over for him.
Right, that's true.
And he saw that potential in the Lokis. I think I don't think that was ever said. I'm just sort of going with that.
That's interesting. Yeah, that's a good point. And the other thing that brings up is because we see Renslayer there at the end of time. You could look at it as, oh well, now she's going to be killed by this beast, or there could be multiple. He Who Remains is there, multiple Kangs there, multiple Lokis there that could save her. There's now you have a group of very knowledgeable, powerful, intelligent people or beings all at the end of time who can probably do whatever they want.
So that could make for also some interesting stories in the future. Yeah. So as a writer, what is your takeaway from this episode?
I think the big thing for me is don't do the expected. It's like I said, I should have seen where this is going, right? We start off the series where, and they even did the flashback in the recap at the beginning of this episode of, you just want the throne, you just want to be king, right? And I was like, at the time I'm watching this show, I'm not really thinking, okay, that's super significant. that's really where they're going to go with this. It was just kind of like, okay, we're seeing where Loki's character was, and we're going to transition him into this show. But that was hugely important, right? He became sort of the king of time or the multiverse or whatever, or at least the timekeeper at the end, and he had his throne, but he only got it by being completely the opposite of who he was. Instead of being this very selfish character, he became this very selfless character. And for me, at least, that I wasn't expecting that. Although, again, that's where they were leading his character throughout the show. I should have seen the ultimate culmination of that is this, but it didn't. Or it didn't register in my mind. So they got me. So yeah, don't do the unexpected. You want an end where it's. I forget who initially said this, but I heard Sean Coyne say this a lot. The end should be inevitable but surprising, and I think they did that really well.
Yeah, I agree.
What is your takeaway?
My takeaway is to kind of just, I think, fill in the blanks. If you intend to fill in the blanks, and that's a big question. We don't know if there's going to be a Loki season 3. Right now, as far as I know, there isn't one planned. And this episode certainly wrapped it up in such a way that they could walk away from the series and it would be wrapped up. But as we talked about, some dialogue here and there just to wrap up these threads a little bit more neatly would have been really helpful. So I think for me, that's what I want to do. Make sure the things that you mean to wrap up are clearly wrapped up.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the season as a whole. What do you think of season 2 overall?
I loved it. I thought it was really well done. There were some couple patchy spots in there where we weren't really sure where it was going. I almost feel like I would like to go back and watch again, because I remember some of the early episodes we had questions and we're like, I wonder if they're going to answer this later on. I don't remember what those questions were right off the top of my head. But if I went back, maybe it's like, oh, they did answer this. Or no, they just kind of ignored that and moved on. It'd be interesting to see that. But overall, I thought it was faithful to the first season, very similar in style and tone, and with this constant increasing of stakes. So I thought they did that really well. I thought they gave us a good character development path for Loki and taking him from his selfish person to a selfless person at the end. And it wasn't like, oh, we see that in 1 or 2 episodes, right? It wasn't like this immediate flip. We see it over time. It's like, oh, okay, he's working against the TVA and he's working against Mobius. And then slowly it's like they start working in concert and then they become friends. And then he's concerned for them, and then he's trying to save them. And then he realizes, wow, there's these other people out there, there's whole other universes out there too that didn't have a chance. He starts to get, some connection to other people, other beings, and that pushes his transition. I thought they did that really well. I think if you look at it from that perspective, the character arc that they were trying to do, and that being the theme of the show from between these two seasons, I think they did it well. I feel like this probably is the wrap up for the Loki series. It certainly seems like an epic conclusion, and they've taken things with his character about as far as they could go. I'm not sure what they would do now that would be a good positive transition off of where they left him. Something larger that he would have to learn seems like it would be tough to find. I feel like more like anything left open that was left intentionally open is probably more for setup for other shows or movies to come. Like we talked about the Renslayer character. Maybe that's someone who appears again later. But I thought they did it pretty well. I guess I felt a little bit lacking toward the end in terms of the other characters. But they kind of tried to wrap them up. It wasn't necessarily about them so much, right? It was Loki's show. So I forgive that a bit. And I guess on the, what you can improve series-wise or season-wise, I think it's just a accumulation of things that we've talked about, most of which are being focused more on clarity at times, and so that people know what's going on in the moment. And, as you said in this episode, know where things, how they were actually wrapped up, what the loose end, how the loose ends were handled and that kind of thing. But overall, I like this show. I like the fact that it's different from the movies and that we didn't just get the same Loki character throughout this series that we saw in the movies. I think that would have been simple and cheap and ultimately unfulfilling. So I think they took it in the right direction. Anyway, I'm rambling enough. What are your thoughts on the season and the series as a whole?
Well, I too really enjoyed it. I thought it was high quality entertainment and fairly consistently high quality entertainment. And even like you said, where there's some patchy places, the still overall quality of each episode was it was really good. It was really amazing. My takeaway of this particular season was kind of actually a little bit of a branch off from something you just said, which was how towards the end, we didn't have so much focus on the other characters. And I remember at the beginning of this season, you said something about how this show seemed to focus more on Sylvie than the Loki that we had been following throughout the entire Marvel universe. And I was thinking how cleverly done it was to have these episodes focus on the character that we most sympathized with and have that evolve through the course of the season. So at the beginning of the season, when we had Loki that we didn't really like that much, and it was focused on Sylvie, and then all of a sudden we're starting to like Loki more and more because he's growing, he's evolving and developing, the focus shifts to him and less on Sylvie. And I thought that was really well done, but still kept us as the audience taking this journey with someone we liked. I thought that was good.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Any other thoughts on Loki season 2?
I assume if anyone's listening to this, if they haven't seen it, we just told you the whole story now, but it's still worth checking out. Like you said, I think each episode is well done, and they clearly had a plan for the series and for the character and where they were going, and that's good to see. I think the writing, by and large, was very good throughout the series, and yeah, I hope they continue to do quality shows like this and to take chances on different things like this. What about you? Final thoughts?
Good stuff. Watch it again. We hope you enjoyed this Ultra edition of the Stories Told podcast. For more storytelling deep dives, check out our weekly episodes and like and subscribe so that you don't miss out on the next story told.